Welcome everyone to AURI Connect's Fields of Innovation, part of AURI Connect's online series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. I'm Dan Scogan, AURI's Director of Industry and Government Relations, and your host for Fields of Innovation. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. Fields of Innovation is focused on bringing together Minnesota's regional ag and food value chains to build capacity and successfully commercialize new and emerging crops. Events focus on highlighting new crops, examining marketing opportunities for emerging crops, and highlighting new technologies in existing crops. Remember that this event is being recorded and archived and can be found at auri.org. Also remember, participants are muted, but you can ask questions through the Q&A portal on your screen. Today, we will continue a conversation around indoor agriculture production, known in the industry as controlled environment agriculture, or CEA. The emerging trend toward growing food indoors holds considerable promise for enhancing Minnesota's ability to feed more people by extending growing seasons in our northern climates. AURI, in partnership with Fields of Innovation sponsor Bremer Bank, will be delving into this emerging sector of food production by hosting this two-part series. And now let's get this important message from Bremer Bank.
Hello, and welcome to today's Field of Innovation webinar. I'm Melissa Carmichael, VP of Strategy and Innovation here at Bremer Bank. At Bremer, we are very proud to partner with AURI and other organizations that find innovative ways to do more. For generations, we have worked to cultivate thriving communities by being the trusted banking partner of farmers and agribusiness in our region. It is in part to this we are very proud to be the 9th largest ag lender in the U.S. So again, we would like to thank you for all that you do to increase the value of Minnesota's agricultural economy. We hope you enjoy today.
In our February discussion, we evaluated how and why innovative CEA technologies are developing new opportunities for the industry. And we examined how consumer demand is also driving the development of local and regional food systems. And we learned more about the capital and the energy investments that growers may consider when entering that industry. Today, we plan to take a look at future-oriented market opportunities for CEA in the state and in the region, exploring how companies around here are growing and activating their channels for the supply chain, the local food system, and the economy. Our panelists today include Kim Tran, Agricultural Attaché at Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the USA, Reen Kamen, the CEO and co-founder of Source.ag, Chuck Tryon, President of bushelboy, and Kevin Ortlandblad. He's the founder of Hemp, formerly Lettuce Abound. So Kim, let's get started with you today, and welcome to AURI's Connect's Fields of Innovation.
Thank you, Dan, for your introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks to AURI for organizing this webinar and creating this great opportunity to discuss the future of CEA and to share experience and our lessons learned in this sector. And it's good to see the great interest in this subject because, to be very honest, we need all the help and support if we are to feed the nearly 10 billion people in 2050. So I look forward to the discussion with all of you today. Dan just introduced me already, but so you know that I work for the Netherlands Embassy in DC. I work in a team of 5 people covering agricultural subjects for the US and Canada. We do this together with our economic network in the US. So together with our Consulate General in Chicago, we collaborate with AURI on the alternative proteins and CEA. So if you read the title of my presentation, From Traditional Trade Relations to Collaborative Innovation for Sustainable Agriculture, well, for the coming 5 minutes, you will learn more about what is meant by that. So the next slide. Maybe you've already been to the Netherlands or you know the Netherlands, but the Netherlands is a tiny country. It's the size of Maryland. and it's the second largest exporter of agricultural products. So that's quite an achievement. Maybe you've all also seen the National Geographic article, which describes the Netherlands as the tiny country that feeds the world. But this development did not happen overnight. The CEA sector in the Netherlands started in the 1900s and has evolved over the last few decades. I would like to mention three things that have been important for the success of the CEA sector. So the first one being that the Netherlands was forced to be innovative and creative because there was limited resources. So being a tiny country, we didn't have the resources of land, right? So we have, to increase production, we had to increase our productivity. And so the second point connected to being innovative and creative is the collaboration and knowledge sharing between growers. Every time a grower learns something, he goes to share it with his neighbor and the other way around. So this way, the whole sector improves. And the third point is that I would like to mention is the ecosystem. The unique thing of the Dutch CEA sector is our ecosystem. That's where all different activities are taking place in close proximity. So the production, but also the supplying industry, the logistics, trade and retail, and at the same time being facilitated by education and research and development with strong support from our government through finance infrastructure and also other services. And everything in this very small country, such as this greenhouse on top of this building in The Hague, which you see on the picture. And Source Egg, also part of the panel, you see him, Rien Kamman, you see him as Lise de Jong Hong in your Zoom. But Source Egg is a beautiful example of innovation and also the application of ag tech in greenhouse. And Rien will tell you more about that later on. So being the second largest exporter did come with a price. So we experienced great loss in biodiversity, and it comes also with a larger ecological footprint. So now our policy from our Ministry of Agriculture is more focused on sustainable circular agriculture. This means closing the loop while at the same time reducing and reusing waste streams. So basically producing more but with less inputs. So that's why the Netherlands is building collaborations focusing on innovation for sustainable agriculture. So that explains the title of this presentation. Sharing our knowledge and experience, sharing our lessons learned so that these are not being repeated. So we have ongoing collaborations in the field of ag tech with Washington State, California, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. And that also explains why we are involved and active in Minnesota. So we're here to share our knowledge. That's the next slide. So looking at our Dutch experience, what are important aspects in a project? So I think the first thing that I would like to mention is the careful preparation and research to see which growing methods work best in Minnesota. Because what works in the Netherlands doesn't necessarily work in Minnesota. So look at what's already taking place in the area and partner up and share knowledge. Strong drivers are important in the region as well, be it a private sector or public or on the research or development side. So a strong local driver is important. The strategic locations close to the market. I think Minnesota is very well located, closer to the market at least than California and Florida or Mexico, where fresh food is currently coming from. Also, availability of resources is important, looking at energy and water, but also financing, permits and licensing, and also looking at what is already there in the ecosystem and what is still lacking. And another essential element that I would like to mention is the triple helix model. This is the collaboration between the public and the private sector and also the Knowledge Institute. This is very important. We always say if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And that really, that very well accounts for the sector, for the CEA sector as well. So that brings me to my last slide. Today's subject is CEA, but AgTech is actually broader than that, and that's this video that I'll be showing is shows the various examples of what AgTech can be. So if you can start then. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope that you find it interesting and that it inspires you to be involved in the food production, the AgTech adventure that we're on. So back to you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and very informative, very interesting. To all of our participants today, make sure that if you have questions for any of our presenters, that you put it in the Q&A portal, and we'll be getting to questions as a group when we get to the end of our presentations. Today we're going to move on to Reen Common. He's going to tell us more about what he's learning and some of the work that he's involved with Source Ag. Reen, welcome to the program Fields of Innovation.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for having me on the webinar for the great state of Minnesota. Much appreciated. I'm all the way here from the Netherlands, but it's an honor to be part of the conversation. So maybe let me share a little bit about Source. Source is a Dutch agriculture technology startup. Our aim is to provide the technology that we see is needed to provide more healthy diets to more people. We want to do it in a way that doesn't break the planetary boundaries. And we feel greenhouses are just a magnificent technology to support this cause. And what we do is build the software and the AI to help that. Now, maybe if we could go to the next slide. Also making the bridge maybe a little bit to what Kim just shared, controlled environment agriculture really is the future of fruit and vegetable production. Just to give you a sense of scale, only a few percentage points of fresh food is actually grown indoor today. And there's massive potential in the US as well to grow more healthy food in a very climate resilient way, much more local, in a very resource efficient way, and at par or even better in terms of unit cost. So affordability, accessibility, sustainability, in terms of providing produce, we feel controlled environment agriculture is playing a very important role and should play a much bigger role in this. Now, greenhouses specifically are a very, very interesting technology. It is an opportunity that across the globe has massive potential, and in the US, in Minnesota as well. Now, what's interesting is, even though the potential is there, it's not yet as scalable as we would like it to be. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So it's a complex business to run and to operate a greenhouse, but one of the key complications is to really make this truly scalable is, how do we move beyond a very high dependency on expert grower? And just to be very clear, these expert growers, these are superhumans, right? These are the superheroes of indoor growing. This is, for instance, Richard, one of the growers we work with. I also know, of course, we're going to hear from Chuck from Bushelboys later. The growers that operate these greenhouses, they are superheroes. What they do is incredible. You have to optimize across 60, 70 parameters every day, from temperature to CO2 to humidity to nutrients to how you trim the plant, how many tomatoes you leave on the truss. It's a very, very complex and expert job. And this is great, but what we need, of course, is a way to get beyond the complication, because even though it's very impressive, it does bring a couple of challenges. Every facility needs one of these growers. They're quite scarce. What happens if they leave or if they move somewhere else? And I would almost summarize it. It is one of the bottlenecks for really scaling this in a reduced risk manner. Now, if we go to the next slide, what we do is we take a very, what I would call, grower-centric approach. So our aim is to empower growers to scale and supported by AI. And AI isn't sort of some magic thing. It's not a silver bullet to solve it all. In the end, it's a means to an end. It's a way to help people do their job more efficiently or easier. And we're very good at developing software and AI. But as Kim mentioned, we believe in working together if you want to build something like this. So we, for instance, have worked very closely, working very closely together with the AgroCare, Europe's largest tomato grower, to build something that actually works for growers. And so this is what we've been doing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the technology, but in essence, it's an intelligent layer around the greenhouse. And thereby we can support and advise the grower to actually operate this greenhouse. So the goal is to de-risk the operations, to help growers both by defining and executing optimal cultivation strategies. Now, if we go to the next slide, please. So what is our aim here? What are we trying to achieve? Well, in essence, you could summarize it in following. If you look at a greenhouse or a grower today, typically it takes quite a few years to be able to be a successful grower. So just to give you a data point, most of the growers we talk to, they say it takes me about 5 years for one cultivar in one specific location to master it. And I think there's actually a lot of examples where it takes longer. So it means if a grower moves to a completely different climate region or has to grow a different seed variety, it's just very hard. So it takes a lot of years to become a grower, and typically you operate one greenhouse. Now, what our software is helping growers to do is actually it takes you less years to become a successful grower. And in doing so, we also help you to, if you maybe a bit more advanced, to operate multiple facilities in parallel. Go to the next slide, please. So how does this work, right? How do we bring this intelligent layer to the greenhouse? In essence, we sort of go through 3 steps. And the first step is we make it digital. So the software platform that we've developed is hardware agnostic. We don't have our own sensors. You don't need to add extra sensors. We work with what's already there. And the greenhouse already generates a lot of different data, from climate to irrigation to labor to what have you. So what we do, our platform, is we connect all of that. And on top, we make sure that the state of the plant is digitized. So we have a good snapshot of what does the plant look like right now. And just to give you a sense of our growth, all of this is already happening in over 500 acres of greenhouses across the European continent and North Africa. So we're partnered with a lot of Dutch growers, and our software is actually now being used across the continent in different climate regions with different cultivars. The first step, as I mentioned, is making it digital. Then the second step is making it smart. So one part of our platform, one part of our AI actually focuses on calculating the optimal strategy for the season. So we're developing a model that can simulate crop growth based on environmental factors such as climate, and then we use machine learning techniques. The model actually arrives at the optimal cultivation strategy, taking into account quite a wide range of external factors such as climate or prices, etc. And this is continuously adjusted during the season based on new information. And so one of the examples is for next week and the week after, should it be 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 72, 74? How does that influence the cost that I will incur? How will it influence the way the crop grows? And what is, at a global level, the optimal strategy I should actually pursue to maximize my business results while minimizing my business risk? So that's about making it smart. It's almost like a Google Maps, right? I want to get from A to B, give me advice on how to do it. And there might be some stuff along the way that I want some advice on how to best deal with it. Then lastly, it's about making it real. So you have, of course, a great strategy, but you still need to execute it. Well, luckily, there are amazing technology already in the greenhouse, from amazing climate computer systems, irrigation systems. There's already a lot of amazing Dutch and international technology out there. And so what we're building is almost a handshake with these systems. So how can we support growers to get from a strategy to an executed strategy that actually makes the strategy real? So it's really about focusing on optimal daily execution of the strategy. So maybe to wrap up, so if I look at the growers that we're already working with, like what's happening in their operations, there's a couple of things. First, they have much more insight in what's the state of the plant, how have I been doing, where should I focus my attention to make sure that nothing goes wrong. One of the key things to do right as a greenhouse grower is to make sure nothing goes wrong. And one mistake can be quite costly. So if I look at the growers we work with, they have much more insight in how do I make sure I keep my greenhouse on the rails. And then we help them to make the right decisions that get the most out of the potential that's there, the potential from the seed, the potential from the location, the potential from the people that work for them, the potential from the seed variety. It's all about maximizing the potential that we have. And that is, looking back to me, it's such an incredibly craft. It's so hard to do that it is truly amazing, the growers that are out there. And what we want to build is the systems to enable the growers that are out there to grow and build more acres of greenhouses, and to help more young people get into this space and give them the tools to become a professional and successful grower themselves as well. So wrapping up, final slide, if I look it all back, greenhouses, controlled environment agriculture, we see as the technology to scale out globally. There's so much potential in the US for this industry. We want to build the software and AI to help people get into the space. And I think together we can actually get to a point where we can provide much more fruit and vegetables for many more people while actually using fewer resources than normally. So thank you.
Thank you, Reen. We're going to move right along, getting some great questions in the Q&A portal already. So I appreciate that for those of you who are participating in our webinar today. Keep putting your questions in there, and when we get to the end, we will ask as many of them as we can. But we want to move on to Chuck Tryon next. Chuck is right down the road from where this webinar is being produced today, as he is at Bushelboy down in Owatonna. Almost called him Ortonville. But Chuck, welcome to Fields of Innovation, and Feel free to tell us your story.
Great, thanks everyone. Good to be here. As Dan said, I'm right down the road in Owatonna. That said, I am surrounded by infrastructure and technology that's a direct result of the Netherlands. So appreciate what the other panelists were sharing. I'm going to really just take you through a quick overview of bushelboy. We've been around 31 years, and so I'll give you just a quick video that highlights our history, what we're doing now. And then I'm going to share how we look at CEA, how we define it, what we think the benefits are from a food standpoint, and then what we're doing in our approach really to innovation, both on new technologies and new products. So let's start with just the bushelboy overview.
Bushelboy Farms naturally grows more flavorful fruits and vegetables. Because before we picked the fruit, we hand-picked a team of workers with an instinctive ability to grow it. They make bushelboy produce nature at its best. Our dedicated team maintains the perfect greenhouse climate year-round. They carefully pick all of our fruits and veggies at the peak of ripeness and race them to local grocery stores and restaurants within hours. All varieties we grow at Bushelboy Farms deliver quality and flavor without equal. Our entire team is devoted to maintaining the highest standards in quality.
We are all worker bees here at bushelboy. The tomato varieties we grow need extra effort, but it's all worth it when the flavor and freshness hits your palate. It's perfect.
Bushelboy Farms is located in the heart of the Midwest, a 32-acre greenhouse in Owatonna, Minnesota, a 16-acre facility in Mason City, Iowa, and a local research and development resource dedicated to innovation, sustainability, and environmental responsibility. Bushelboy Farms naturally grows more flavorful produce thanks to a passionate team striving to produce the best. Thoughtfully grown, picked ripe, delivered fresh. Bushelboy.
Great. So you can see certainly a lot of technology that's already been talked about, and you see in that video. But at the end of the day, this is still a people-driven business. It requires talent. It requires people that understand how to get the most out of the environment. And what I like to do is just kind of set the stage for controlled environment agriculture. So, the industry's given it a nice acronym with CEA, but it means different things to different people. And I like this definition because it's not all high tech. There is still some low tech elements of growing in controlled environments, and it starts with what's more commonly known as hoop houses. So on the left you see that, and then it gets into more much more higher tech, like our high tech glass greenhouses that we operate, where it is fully climate controlled. We are taking advantage of natural sunlight, but we're also supplementing that with artificial light. And then moves into truly indoor growing, where again fully climate controlled, but not utilizing anything from externally, not using any natural daylight or sunlight. Everything is artificial light in that environment. And from just an advantage of where we see controlled environment agriculture improving the world of, in particular, food and fresh produce. It's when you start looking at the fresh produce industry in the U.S., the reality is that the fresh produce that we have in our stores has lost half of its shelf life in transit. Another 40% actually never gets consumed, gets thrown away. That can be thrown away on a farm, could be thrown away at a distribution center, in a store, in a restaurant, and more commonly by you and I in our homes out of our refrigerators. This all compounds itself when you realize that there are, despite our economy, there are a number of people that don't have access to fresh, affordable, nutritious, fresh produce. And the sort of the dirty secret in this country is at this point, if you look at what the USDA recommendations and FDA recommendations are, only 10% of the US population is getting that recommended number of servings of fresh fruit and vegetables. So we see CEA certainly playing a significant solution in this. And there are a lot of benefits, and I'm not going to go through this entire board of benefits. I'm going to play my own little game of tic-tac-toe and show you that we see for our business 3 things that are really exciting. One is organic is much quicker and easier to transition to in a controlled environment where you are growing things, particularly in high-tech greenhouses and indoor farms. So that's a big piece for future innovation. The second, the sort of the bullseye in the middle, and it's there for a reason, is this increase in shelf life. Growing things closer to where the population is going to be consuming them instantly gives you that ability to have greater shelf life. So that's a quality improvement, and it's going to reduce that food waste in the end. And it also leads into this kind of the final point, which is improve shelf life. So the quicker you consume something from when it's picked, you've got a better nutritional profile in that. So that's one piece. And the second is you can actually develop varieties to grow in greenhouses and grow them for specific benefits, including a specific nutrition profile. So that's what's exciting for us as we look at this industry. As we approach innovation, for us, as I mentioned, we really look at it in 2 parts. One is technology, the other is products. So from a technology standpoint, it really is about 2 areas. One, how do you just improve the growing conditions in the environment that you're growing? So those are things around lighting control, lighting technology, climate control, and integrated pest management. And then the more sort of high potential piece for us and for those like us is how do we get better labor utilization? Labor is a significant challenge for our business, like it is for most businesses right now. So we're actively looking at things as it relates to remote crop monitoring. Reen sort of mentioned this. This is really the ability to use advanced imagery, artificial intelligence, to get more eyes on more plants more often. Without actually having to have more eyes. So I appreciate the sort of the superhero connotation of expert growers. Please don't tell that to all those expert growers. They know it already enough. But that is that we need technology to enable that talent to do more. We also need technology to be able to help do some tasks that currently we have people doing. And those, so a lot of crop work that is done right now could be transitioned to some form of robotic crop work. There's a lot of technologies being developed. That picture is not from our greenhouse. That's from our friends at Tortuga, developing some different types of robotic technology for picking, in this case, for picking strawberries in a greenhouse. Those are all things that we are actively evaluating, looking at, and trialing in our operation. And then from new categories, so we've been around 31 years. Of that 31 years, for the first 29, we really only grew one thing, and that was tomatoes. We really played, and not to get too academic on the funnel on the right on our new product development process, but we really played on the very bottom of that funnel. We tested things, we launched them to see if they would sell, and then we looked back to see if we could make any money on them. So this is really about the approach to really doing early stage development work in a much broader way, looking at a lot of different ideas in the development process, and then understanding if it would make sense for us. So does it make sense with the vision that we have for our company? Is there a supply chain opportunity? I mentioned here, is the supply chain broken, or is it just have some inherent problems? We're growing strawberries now, as you saw in the video. And that's really because in Minnesota for 9 months out of the year, you can't get fresh locally grown strawberries up until we started growing them indoors. You had to rely on product coming from Mexico or California, and really products that have been bred to have a long shelf life to weather that long transit time. So we look at whether it fits. We look to see what fits in our greenhouses. What can we grow with the technology we already have? And then we look at trends from a consumer standpoint. There are crops that we could grow that are like tomatoes that have some interesting consumer trends behind them. Something like eggplant, which is a very similar vine crop to tomatoes. It has trends that are being driven by really the need for plant-based protein alternatives, but also some cultural changes in our markets. So those are the things we're monitoring as we look at innovation and look at new categories, and exciting to show any of the visitors later today that are going to see our R&D greenhouse, see those strawberries and some of the work that we have going on from there.
All right, Chuck, appreciate the presentation. Good information. Interesting to see Bushelboy and how they work down in the Owatonna area. Remember, once again, we will be taking your written questions in the Q&A portal on your screen at the end of all of the presenters today, and we've got one to go. We want to hear from Kevin Ortenblad. Kevin is with Hemponics. So Kevin, welcome to Fields of Innovation.
Thank you so much for having us. Our vision was to take an existing building that is on most farmyards and turn it into an indoor controllable space to grow things at. So this is how the building started out. It was just a regular pole building, a 50 by 100 pole building like you'd see anybody have. We lined it with steel, and then we started to wire it. We put some systems in there. We started out growing lettuce. We were actually an organic lettuce, an aeroponic organic lettuce farm for a while. And then somebody approached us to grow hemp seed.
We will come back to Kevin if he can get back in to our webinar today, and we hope that he can. Meanwhile, and maybe Kevin was the one that would best answer this, but it came to me that we have a lot of buildings in just about every city in Minnesota that have either gone out of business or transferred to another city, and they're rather large. Are these kinds of buildings that can be retrofitted for indoor agriculture? And Chuck, I don't know if you or Kim or Reen want to tackle that one, but what does it take to retrofit a building, or is it just easier to go from the ground up? And I'll just remind you that you're muted if you do want to weigh in on that.
I'll weigh in quickly on that. This is Chuck from Bushelboy. It really depends on what you want. So certainly buildings can be retrofitted, and depending on the, as I talked about the different types of CEA, that true indoor growing, fully environment controlled, including artificial lighting. Any of those structures can, or most of them can have some form of retrofitting to fit something in. A lot of it comes down to what the market is, what you want to grow, and the cost of the technology. And so there is certainly, while not as much in Minnesota yet, across the U.S., certainly in some of the urban areas, there are that conversion of, be it office buildings, be it retail fronts, be it warehouses that are having sort of inserts put in to have some form of indoor farming.
Reen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I fully agree with Chuck, and maybe if I could add to that, it really depends, I think, what you want to grow, right? And just to give you a little bit of sense, I think in the end, everybody's looking for what is the best way to achieve high quality at a cost competitive way of growing it. And it needs different ways of growing and different scales to make that work. And, if you grow leafy greens, for instance, retrofitting an indoor place could be great. You can typically stack them so you can go high. A tomato plant, it can grow up to 30, 40, 45 feet, and it needs a lot of sunlight, just a more energy intense crop. And so For instance, the facility like bushelboy has, at scale using natural sunlight for that specific crop in a certain market, that might be the right way of growing it. So there's no silver bullet. It really depends what you want to grow. And I think that's typically how to look at these things.
Kim, I want to come to you for just a second as well, because in your presentation, you talked about the government support that is given to you in the Netherlands. Tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of support does the government put forth to help somebody who may want to get into growing?
Well, there are different, thank you for the question. I think that's a beautiful question, but not one clear answer, because there's so many ways how we promote entrepreneurs. It's on the education side and the research and development side of it, but also on doing business, but maybe also on the licensing and permits that are being provided. So in different ways. So through several means we do it, and also on several levels, because we have municipalities, provincials, and then our federal government. You can compare it to the US on county level, but then state level, and then federal level as well. I think what stands out, if you would compare it to the US, is our a heavy focus on research and development. From the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a separate budget which we spend on R&D in agriculture. So that really stands out, I think, and also companies itself invest in R&D. So to be very frank, there's just so many things, so many programs, support programs, and the complaint of entrepreneurs is usually that there are so many and not very clear which one to use. But so it depends on what you're aiming for, actually.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we have Kevin back with us, so I'm going to defer to him to see if he would like to pick up where he kind of left off, and we'll let him continue with his presentation. Kevin, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. That's part of living out in the country. So we put in some systems to grow lettuce with, and we were approached by a company to grow seed for the hemp industry. One thing we realized is hemp genetics are extremely unstable. So I'll show you just a couple quick pictures of the building. Everything is computer controlled. The fertilizer is controlled by a computer. The lighting is controlled by the computer. Everything that the plant gets. This is a little picture of when we did grow lettuce. Now we grow things in buckets. We use the same watering system, with the exception of we use landscape emitters, because we need to water them at about a gallon one time a day. And so that's a big change that we made to the whole system. Like I said, the genetics for hemp was extremely unstable. We worked 3 years to stabilize 3 varieties that are actually CBG varieties. There's a big difference in CBD versus CBG. I would challenge everybody to do some research on it. Don't take my word for it, but it's CBG has a lot broader spectrum of what it works on than CBD does. But our whole challenge for indoor farming in a small building that was already here was air exchange, humidity control, all of that. And I'm sure that the people on the panel can say the same thing. We've got, I think, 5 or 6 dehumidifiers to keep the humidity around 35 to 40. That's the perfect humidity for it. Our temperature stays 72 degrees now. We switched all of our metal halide induction lighting to LED lights, lot better choice. We were making about 350,000 BTUs of heat a day. It's hard to keep up with that with air conditioning. So we're a very small operation. We can get about if we really work hard, we could probably get 10 to 20 million seeds for the hemp industry out of here. Right now, we've got enough seeds, so we're growing a flower crop, and we can get about 3 to 4 crops of hemp flower out of this. That's my presentation in a nutshell. If you have questions, please ask.
All right, thanks, Kevin. That's your story and you're sticking to it. I appreciate that. We're going to go to some of our listeners and the participants' questions because we've got several here and we'd like to get through them. If possible, and this is a wild card question for whoever wants to pick it up, if possible, I'd like to learn more about growing in a saline environment. Does anyone have any information on that? And if not, I see heads shaking side to side. Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, so saline production was also part of my movie clip. And that's indeed one of the areas that my ministry is doing research in. So as we know, due to climate change, more and more countries will be affected by saline water, right? And so to make them more resilient to making their agricultural production more resilient, we do research in that. So if you're interested in that, I can't see the name anymore, Andrew, then I can send you some more information about that. But yes, we do research on that.
Or if you have a contact email or something you could put in the chat so Andrew could contact you, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I will put something in the chat.
Thanks, Kim. Is there any, is there any company working to bring indoor growing to arid regions to help with food security?
I can maybe take a first one of that. I actually see quite a lot of greenhouse operators operating in a very wide set of climate regions. So like Chuck mentioned, in the greenhouse, you still leverage some of those free external factors like the sun, but also for cooling or heating. And so one of the growers we work with, they are actually operating greenhouses in Tunisia, which is close to a desert, arid environment, and still very successfully grow fresh food there. And you sort of see these greenhouses, you have to tailor them a bit to the location. You really have to think about what's my strategy, but the beauty of it is actually you can use them in a quite wide range of climate zones.
And Kevin, I would think that goes into part of your presentation where keeping that good humidity, a good heat source, good cooling, all comes into play if you're going to have a successful indoor farm.
Yeah, you want that professionally designed. An HVAC system, our building actually turns over the air 5 times an hour, besides the fans that we run and the dehumidifiers. Air movement, especially for hemp, very susceptible to powdery mildew, but so are most other crops. And humidity and airflow is the key to prevent that.
Here's another question for Reen. Do you maintain a database of plants that you can optimize, or does your platform learn with whatever plant is being grown?
So it's a great question. So one of the, I would say, core competencies of our AI development teams is how do you build algorithms that are what we call transferable across different crop varieties? And there's actually quite some synergies between crop types, right? What you want to build is an algorithm that you don't need to retrain for every new seed variety that comes to market, or if you've seen something new. So if you do this well, you can actually either be already pretty close if you see a new seed variety that the algorithm hasn't seen, or actually learn in a fairly short time how to best grow such a variety.
Chuck, how does Bushelboy source its innovation technology? Primarily in-house R&D or externally as well?
So it's a combination. We do have an R&D sort of in-house capability. We've got our research and development greenhouse that we put in place a little over 2 years ago. But we also partner with others. Seed companies are a good source of innovation. They're doing a lot of this work. So we're looking at seed companies, universities. This is a little bit where I think Kim mentioned sort of the benefit of the triple helix. Finding those opportunities where we're working with not just internally ourselves, but others that are learning in this area. And as you can bring public, private, and university minds and resources together, I think that's a really good opportunity. I think particularly for our region.
I think here's another wild card question for whoever wants to pick it up, but is shelf life an issue? Is disease an issue? Is over ripening an issue for these CEAs?
Yes.
Kevin, you're smiling.
If Kevin wants to add on, but shelf life, absolutely. So we're dealing with products that by their very nature are extremely short shelf lives. 7 days, sometimes less. When we're doing strawberries, it has a shorter shelf life than tomatoes do, and that's one of the benefits of us servicing the upper Midwest and getting a lot of our produce delivered on our own fleet of direct store delivery trucks. So what we're picking today, we're delivering to stores tomorrow. So that's kind of our advantage with that.
Ours was the same. We would, when we grew lettuce, we would pick it on Friday, deliver it or Thursday, deliver it on Friday, and it would last a couple of weeks. But that's always a challenge.
I think this question came up last month in our first part of our series, but how does crop nutrition profiles compare between indoor and outdoor growing? Anybody doing any research on that?
Yeah, we actually tailor our fertility recipe to tissue samples that we take from leaves. We take leaf samples twice a week. We send them off, we get them analyzed, and we adjust our nutrients that way. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but nutrition of the plant is a very vital part of indoor farming because you're not getting anything from the ground.
Reed?
And maybe one thing to add is some of you, I believe, will visit Bushelboy later today. But in a lot of these facilities, whether it's indoor or greenhouses, because it's hydroponics, you actually have a lot of control. So typically all the way down to I have a slab where the tomatoes are growing, and I can optimize on an element by element level which nutrients I'm going to administer to the crop. Typically, you can even recycle this water and reuse the nutrients. There's different ways of doing it, I guess. But so you can steer quite a bit the nutrient level of these crop.
Is artificial light typically used to augment plant growth in Bushelboy's greenhouse system? Also, does the greenhouse use heat or carbon dioxide obtained from any partnered processes?
Yeah, so we do use artificial light to supplement the natural daylight. That supplemental light generally happens during the time of year you would think it would. So it starts right around shortly after Labor Day and runs until about Easter. So we're about a week away from turning our lights off for the summer season, where there's enough natural daylight to drive the plants. We're using heat that we as our primary source. It is coming from our natural gas boilers, but we are pulling the CO2 off of those boilers and having that CO2 put into the greenhouses. So we are, instead of bringing outside CO2 in, we're taking that CO2 right off our boilers instead of releasing that to the environment.
Do anyone on the panel, have you seen any problems with high moisture from the plants themselves?
That's one thing we fight constantly is humidity. I know Chuck talked about CO2 a little bit. We have to regulate our CO2 depending on the maturity stage of the hemp plant, but we get as high as 1,300 parts per million, which if they're in there very long, you'll get a headache out of that. But yeah, moisture is the big killer.
For the building and the plant?
So the building was created to withstand that. We actually literally wash the building down with water. So it's vapor locked. We sprayed foam inside, and so it's ready for moisture. But yes, moisture is not good for buildings.
While I have you here, Kevin, what are some research funding opportunities you've discovered for industrial hemp?
So industrial hemp, we grow mainly CBG. That's all we grow is CBG, and we've developed through pollination. We've developed 3 different varieties that are quite different. But the CBG opportunities are with CBG oil. We've got 5 or 6 products that we handle. They're CBG products. Macular degeneration, any bowel issues, acid reflux, that's all literally cured with CBG. It's ridiculous what big pharma has let slide through their fingers.
Here's a question for anyone who wants to pick it up. What kind of disease pressure does CEA experience, and how is it best mitigated?
I'll just add in, it's I think Kevin mentioned it. A lot of the similar pressures that you get outdoor farming in these areas. So those can be things like powdery mildew. There are various insects that do still get into particularly a glass greenhouse. So we have to have a fully functional integrated pest management process and system in place. We're utilizing non-synthetic chemicals at all times. We're using primarily beneficial insects to control other pests that can get into the greenhouse. So it's while we are indoors, we still particularly on the glass greenhouse side, we still face similar challenges that open field farming faces.
Reen, you seem to be agreeing with that comment.
We filter all of our air. We filter all of our air through 600 HEPA filters. We don't have the advantage of having a green or a glass greenhouse. We still get insects, surprisingly enough. And so we, like Chuck said, we have to use predatory type insects to go after them.
Reen?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people realize that, but it's actually, if you walk through a greenhouse, there's a lot of insects actually. It's not sort of this completely, closed system. And a lot of them are, and that's the beauty, of course, also from a literally controlled environment spaces. To one degree, it's like sailing. You use the external factors a bit, but you also are quite mindful of how do I build this internal ecosystem that's robust. And part of it is in prevention, hygiene, making sure that sort of those protocols are in a way that you mitigate any of these risks. It's also about having the right climate strategy, right? Humidity can actually play a part in this. And then it's working with, like Chuck mentioned and Kevin, biological ways of fighting these pests. It's again a nice balance of different things you can use to mitigate that.
Here we have kind of a comment question, but it says any system is good for small rural areas, but with geothermal as the heat source. And then it's a question mark. So any information on using geothermal?
I can do a quick first one. I'm curious how the rest looks at it. In the Netherlands, we do see actually that you create these, like Kim also mentioned, almost ecosystems where geothermal is a great source of heating for greenhouses, especially if you can share it at scale. We have a region in the north of the Netherlands called the Agriport. Very well thought through. It's a lot of geothermal heating being generated. They share also some of the energy sources. And that's actually powering these greenhouses. So yeah, that's definitely a very viable and proven way of heating it.
Nobody seems to be doing CEA using aquaponics. Why not? Nobody knows?
When you say aquaponics, are you referring to fish?
Or hydro? I think they may have, well, they said aquaponics, so that would be fish. Or did they mean hydroponics?
They probably meant aquaponics. Very difficult to filter the waste products from fish. for us, it just wouldn't work.
Too hard to clean up the waste stream?
Too hard to get that to go through a pump and go through a landscape emitter that we use now. We used to use nozzles, and you just couldn't do it.
Two more questions we're going to get through. I did skip one earlier. I apologize for that. But how much do pesticides contribute to the moisture problem? Chuck or Kevin, I guess. Maybe Reen would have a.
I'd say on our end, there's no connection between pesticide use, when we do use it, and any issues with moisture.
Then finally, do issues arise with disposing of organic waste materials or other residue from growing hemp or any of the other crops? So do we have a problem disposing of the organic waste materials?
We live out in the middle of the country. We dug a hole and we bury it. We do mulch it into areas that we are gardening. Real easy.
Yeah, I'll add, we do have some challenges. Tomatoes, when we have tomatoes that end up as part of the waste stream, it's a high acid product, not a great ingredient for some composting recipes. So that can provide a challenge. We also, we use the way these tomatoes, in particular the tomatoes grow. Reen mentioned these vines at the end can be, upwards of 40 feet long. They're being supported by clips and twine. And so when we do remove those vines, they're not in great shape today to easily go into a composting site. So I didn't mention this earlier, but that's one of our key areas of innovation is how do we replace some of the more traditional components that get used in these greenhouses that prevent something from going and not going into a landfill, being either going to compost or something where even more value can be derived from it.
Well, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank our panelists, Kim and Reen, Chuck and Kevin. Thank you very much for sharing of your time and your talents and your information today. It's been a good presentation today, and I appreciate your time. I want to thank everyone for a great presentation. Now remember, a recording of the entire conversation will be available at AURI.org. And that does conclude AURI Connect's Fields of Innovation for today, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. Here's an invitation to join AURI on the Fields of Innovation Facebook group. And for you there, you'll find future postings of events and other interesting content. Thank you for participating today, and we hope you'll join us this afternoon for a networking social from 4 till 6 o'clock at Corks and Pints down in Faribault, Minnesota. Remember to visit the Fields of Innovation Facebook page, and for more information on Fields of Innovation or any of the work that AURI is involved with, you can go to AURI.org.